So welcome everyone to our Chaos Diversity, no, not Diversity Inclusion, the Chaos Weekly meeting. Today is October 27th. Wanted to post the minutes in the chat. Feel free to add yourself to the list of attendees and let us know how you're doing. Something that is on your desk. Describe how your day is going. Add an emoji. So
your choice.
Your choice, exactly. Agenda notes. Matt, do we need this first point?
I'm back. I had my week off. It was great.
Awesome. I'll just change the language that you were out last week.
Oops.
Then the next item is Chaos MMM, the meeting minute management.
That's me.
And awesome.
I just wanted to mention that I guess it's on my computer because I have an AMD processor that it's very slow. That I'm getting to a point where when I load the meeting minutes and I accidentally control enter or do something that like requires any kind of processing on the document, it will lag for a while. I just wanted to mention I did look at it and we do have quite a long string of meetings in the single document right now. So I was wondering if we could, I got a kind of something I've seen before is that when you get 2 months into the next year, then you archive the previous year into like a 2019 or 2020 document. And then you have those 2 months of history to work with as well. Because I don't think we've ever gone back more than 2 months in our meeting minute history. But that's just kind of an idea. I don't know what people think of it.
I've done a search on the entire document to look up when we last talked about something, and that has gone back more than 2 months. So
Okay.
as long as we have a way to still search the minute, I'm okay with finding a solution.
So we could do a Control F style archive, where we just look, we just have an archive of all the past meeting minutes. I think that would be fine as long as it's not like 10 years. But maybe eventually we'll have to find another system for that. But
we could probably just put a link at the bottom or the top for archival minutes at some point if that becomes necessary, right?
At one point, we were also talking about taking the minutes and putting them into a repository. So we could export the minutes as Markdown and then create a Markdown file for each meeting.
So we were doing that in the evolution group for actually for a considerable amount of time. It adds an element. It adds a lot of work doing that. I'll just say that.
What if we don't do it every time, but once per year?
I would be okay with that.
And since we're using headings appropriately, we should be able to split the file at the level 1 heading into separate files for each meeting.
okay, so that's something to look forward to on March or whatever time we decide to do that.
Well, if anyone would like to take this up, we can start by archiving 2019, 2018, 2017. We have a few years to start playing with.
I don't know if I have enough knowledge of how this process works, but I'd be glad to do it with somebody else, and I could be their helper in this. I guess grunt is a bad word for that, but
I can help with that, Matt.
okay, sounds good.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, John.
I think it's just going to be a bunch of cutting and pasting and some cross-linking. I don't think it's going to be crazy hard.
Yeah,
If
that sounds good.
If your machine grinds to a halt on that stuff, I can probably knock it out. Cool.
I was a
Yeah.
little late, so I'm not sure if it was mentioned, but there are several plugins that you can use to export Google Docs into Markdown. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I use docs to Markdown.
Seems like a pretty straightforward name.
Do we want them to go to separate Google Docs, or do we want them to go to Markdown? In GitHub, I'm assuming.
My understanding was we were going to archive them as Markdown in the repos, but maybe I was not understanding that correctly.
I certainly feel like that is a better way to preserve things in the long run than Google Docs.
Okay.
Just because somebody owns this Google Doc and they
True that.
They close their account, we're toast.
I think I do.
Yeah.
Maybe Georg might actually. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, but yeah, there's probably some safety in Markdown in a Google and a repository compared to Google Docs long term.
Yeah, and the tools for working with text files have been evolved ever since we have computers. They're just not as nice with the user interface.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out. I'll have to figure out where to host, or if you can upload images, because some of our docs have images in them too. I don't know if that works in the GitHub Markdown. Does it?
You can put an image into the Markdown. It might be manual. I'm not sure, but
Okay, I'll figure it out. We can mess around with it.
Okay, sounds good.
So I don't know about exporting images from the Google Doc automatically. If you want to do it manually, the best way I've found is to move it into a keep, so save to keep, and then save it from Google Keep, because I have not found a way to save it directly from a Google Doc.
So I had to do this for a pretty large project, and a very strange but useful workaround. The JavaScript library of Discourse, of all things, the community platform that converts Google Doc to Markdown, is perfection. It's never messed up anything, no matter how weird. And it automatically gives you an external URL for each image. So if you copy and paste the whole file into a Discourse draft, and then paste it into Markdown, you'll be good to go. And if that makes no sense.
Is there a plugin for this?
This isn't a plugin. I am a member of way too many Discourse communities. And if you just go to draft state of one of them, I can think of one that's public, but it's a workaround I've been using. I've thought about pulling out the JavaScript library and turning it into a tool, but I'm not good at JavaScript and keep fiddling with other things. Just advice I had to share, because I know how painful it is to go do all the images by hand. So I don't want you to do that.
Cool, thank you. I'll take a look at this.
I'll get you a link to a public Discourse you can join, so just so you can test it and see what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
Is this something we're going to want to replicate for all of the working groups?
Yeah, probably so.
So write up a process on it so they can do it as well.
Maybe we need to include this in the January metrics release process. Just, release the metrics and archive all of the meeting notes for the year at the same time.
Who knew this would be so much? It's just like a cut and paste and put it somewhere else.
Yep, and the question we still have is, where do we want to store the files when we are done? I would recommend the governance repository.
+1 on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it sounds like the right choice.
And then
Yeah.
for each working group, should we record in the group repository, or it will be again in the governance?
For the working groups, I would say it makes sense to keep it in the working groups. But if the working groups decide something else, we can also move it into governance.
I guess on the extended topic, I'm curious what happens to all the meeting recordings.
And YouTube.
YouTube?
Mm-hmm.
Would it be worth having any sort of association if we're publishing the meeting notes and there is, not to add again more complexity here, but if people are watching the recording and they can refer back to what was recorded from it, it would kind of complete the record.
Yeah, I could. I hadn't been so I'm the one that gets the ping that the recording is ready, and I just put them on YouTube pretty uneventfully, you know. But it'd be easy enough to add in the description just the link to the Google Doc. That shouldn't be any trouble at all.
Or the link to the GitHub file for that meeting, if that's the right.
Yeah, I suppose after a year, the archived or the video would need to point to the archive. See what I'm saying? Like for a while, just pointing to the Google Doc would be fine.
Maybe with a like pointing to a Google Doc and a note that at the end of the year it'll be archived. Just a note.
I'll just put something. If this video is less than a year old, click this Google Doc link. If it's more than a year old, go to the archive.
Yeah.
People can figure that out, I hope.
Do you sort the videos by like creating channels or?
So I get the ping that's like your recording is done. I download it. I put it in iMovie. I add a CHAOSS like little logo to it. And like an intro, there's an intro kind of thing. And then I upload it to the channel. That's it. And I just label it like this one's labeled CHAOSS.Community.Oct.27.2020. That's it.
So we could maybe sort those videos into channels.
Yeah, that was in the last discussion that we can create a channel for common and for other working groups and add the videos to that.
Yeah.
So what we have.
Yeah,
Sorry.
there's one challenge around that. If you remember, we were talking about trying the automation stuff last week, which I tried out. I put some notes in last week's minutes. The automatic, if we automate that process, it does not allow for selecting which channel you're publishing to. It is only to the top level of the account, and then you can assign it once it's there. But the automation won't do that automatically.
Are you able to select the name?
You can only sign into the YouTube account, and it puts it in the top level of the account, and that's it.
Okay.
You can put it in there as a private video when you first upload it, so that you can move it around to where you want, but it's not automatic.
It still saves us the time of downloading the video and uploading it again. We can't edit it like Matt is doing it, but it'll save us several steps.
Yep.
I'm editing it like I add a logo. I wouldn't call that editing, but thank you.
So what we're doing right now. Sorry, Kevin, go ahead.
Oh, that's all right. My only point for asking that was that we could attach the link to these documents to the channel rather than the videos individually, and that would save us some work.
So what we are doing right now is we have playlists on our CHAOSS 2, and I have set up to look for keywords and then assign automatically the videos to those playlists. So if DNI shows up, it automatically assigns it to the DNI working group. If weekly is in the name, it puts it into the weekly playlist. So we do have that level of organization and some form of automation.
let me in an effort to get more information on this, let me connect with Elizabeth, just in terms of, particularly as we're moving to the Linux Foundation for Zoom next week.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how that automation plugin will work on an enterprise-wide thing either, so that'll have to be tested out.
So let's do a little bit of investigation, just maybe what the automation options are from end to end. Because there's also the option too that we can always just simply live stream to YouTube, which I think also just helps with the recording as well. I don't know, I would like to think it does. I assume live streams are recorded.
Yeah, usually they're available as a recording afterwards.
So let me kind of look at what that process could be. I will say that the YouTube interface for helping people, I don't find it to be terribly helpful. I find it confusing. Like sometimes you'll end up on a page and you're like, how did I get here? How do I get back to this edit page? How do I...
Yep. So anyway, thank you, John, for following up on your action item from last week and sharing your insights and even creating a Google Doc with your findings. That's really awesome.
Welcome.
Well, that's super helpful. All right, cool.
Okay, so we have next in our agenda to thank King for creating a mind map of the chaos metrics. Someone asked where there is a high resolution image. I know it was shared via mailing list, the original.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
So is it all right if I put the PDF in the minutes here? Or like a link to it?
A link to what?
I might just be able to put the link, the PDF on Google Drive and then just put it in here so that we have the full resolution available.
That'd be super cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt.
So should we be including this with the release? Should we put it on the metrics page? I like this visual. Like even being involved in all the working groups and kind of having a sense of what metrics exist in the working groups. I mean, this is helpful for me. Mm-hmm. So I'm guessing it's helpful for everybody, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And I actually created some, with that inspiration, I created a bunch more that focus on some of the discussions that have been happening in the risk working group, like to explain. I mean, it's a really good visual model and the tools for doing it are super easy now that I know they exist.
I would love to include it on the metrics page, personally.
That's fun for that.
Yeah, if it's an image, we just have to create like clickable zones, but I'm sure Kevin can figure that out.
Right. Yeah. When King presented this originally, I had thought that this would be great for the metrics release, and then I also thought that it would be great for the handbook, the documentation that they're creating.
Oh, the one that Josh Karat is doing?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, I think this is a good idea. My concern would be with the growing of the network, of the mind map, that if you want to fit it on the page, the text will be small. So we'll just have to figure out how to still have it useful as it grows.
I do like the idea of the clickable version if we do put it on the website. because then you can have the resolution larger, and you can also keep the formatting a little bit consistent. Like I think the visual is awesome, but just as you read it, it's much easier to read the things on the right-hand side of the screen because it's progressing in the logical categorization that it structures all the working groups. So the flip, while it's visually appealing, makes it harder to read it, just because then you're having to read backwards. So I like it as like a summary image, but if we wanted to have something that's more usable in terms of, we want people to come and explore the kinds of metrics and areas of metrics. Like that's how I see this really valuable, as a really valuable tool. It's a great introduction to the project. Yeah, it's generally positive. There's just a few quick reactions. So I think I really like the idea of it being both in the release and then some sort of live version of it that could grow with the project.
Honestly, if you take the chaos metrics and put them on the left and make it take up a whole page, it would fit like perfectly. I
think. Like taking the orange and the purple and putting it over on the right? Is that, I agree with you. It would read better like that.
Then you lose the fun, like spider arms.
Well, when it's over like that, it reminds me there's a Wikipedia page that's a huge image of all the Linux distros. And it's basically that. It all goes to the right with these. So yes, it's not a spider. It's whatever creature has all its arms to the right.
Yep. Here's the picture. I put in the chat.
Scalable vector graphics. We love those. Infinite zoom.
Okay, so moving on, we have a reminder that the APEC community call happens every other week at 8 a.m. Central. And next week is the next call. And the US is also changing time zones next week. So it will be 1 hour later for everyone who is not changing time zones with us. Did I say that right? 1 hour later? Yes, because the sunrise 1 hour earlier.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Fall back.
We fall back.
So everything's earlier, technically.
It happens earlier for us, but the meetings for others are later.
I'm staying out of this.
Yeah. Sure.
There are links on the CHAOSS Participate page.
Okay. Yeah, just map the European time zones, but I think they've already switched, right? So we're just catching up to them. So now they're now closer to us. And then next week they will be back at the ordinary differential. So it will be later than it is this week, I think is what you're saying, Georg.
Yes.
Okay. Now I'm tracking.
And as a plug for that meeting, the visual that we were just looking at was originally presented in that meeting. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going on over there. So everyone should come if they can.
So if you're ever in doubt about when meetings are happening, on the CHAOSS.Community.Oct.27.2020 page, we have a calendar that you can add to your own calendar. And on the different call information, we always have a check your local time link. I try to keep them updated. Sometimes meetings get moved around. If you find one that doesn't match up, let me know. But it's a really nice tool to see when the meetings are happening in your time zone. So anything else on APEC call? Then we move on to the SDDI, the Software Developer Diversity and Inclusion Group at the Linux Foundation, which was announced yesterday. And it's a complementary effort to what we're doing in CHAOSS, where SDDI is going to focus on the best practices around diversity and inclusion and putting some science and research behind that. Because right now, a lot of the diversity inclusion recommendations are anecdotal, or they have been tried in one place, but not multiple. And the work that we're doing in CHAOSS is more about measuring it than actually deriving how should you go about doing things better. And so SDDI is a nice complement where, I don't know, my hope is that they can use the metrics we have in their research to develop best practices, and that we can have a partnership there.
Nicole Huseman had a nice quote in the press release, co-director of the CHAOSS project. So I think there's an interest in creating collaboration between the two efforts.
I put the quote in our minutes. Awesome. The next item on the list is community report. Someone put a question there whether images are all good.
That was me. So for all of you that know, we've been having problems when people do a request for a community report. Not all images. So basically we ask for their image if they want to put their image, like the project image, at the top of the report. And not all images were coming across in all the different browsers. So Kevin, I think, is this fixed? Is this good to go? Kevin?
We are good. Thanks.
Oh, okay.
Big thanks to Annie and her team for resolving the issue. They were very attentive.
So is everything ironed out on that now?
We should be good. It's live on the site. I dropped the link in. It is. It's. As far as I know, we're good.
Okay.
Further use and testing may prove me wrong, but
until then.
Until then, yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll talk with Elizabeth to really send that out again on Twitter.
Awesome. Shall we do a trial run now that it's done? I can request one for the Augur project, and we just go through the motions to make sure we not only have the form, but all the steps that come after it.
You can always submit a test. We've submitted, I think, maybe 1,000 tests.
Yeah. There's been I get a lot of email on that, and then so far none of them have been real.
Have we done a test on the full process though?
Initially, we built the initial report. We haven't had a new report come along yet.
Oh, I see what you're saying, Georg. Like actually getting the report and dropping it into the Google Doc or the Drive, and then I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Not just the request. Yeah, no, that's probably a good idea. Just so we all. So what Georg is talking about is kind of the behind the scenes. So when a request comes in, there are some wheels that kind of have to turn behind the scenes to generate the report. It's not all automated.
Yeah.
And so just making sure that all the gears are kind of in place.
I hope so.
They're in place. I hope so too.
Yeah, I've been following it very rigorously. The moment anything comes, I just need to get the graph from both the side, and all the system is already in place.
So Georg, I think that's a great idea. I'd be kind of curious to see just how long it takes and the amount of effort and all that kind of stuff. So.
Do we need some sort of data capture disclaimer on this page?
Like what?
Like we won't use your data for such and such, or this is how we're going to use your data.
Yeah. I mean, it's a giant opt-in site. But we still could say we don't share your data. I think that's good.
It's always good.
Yeah.
So I think we do have a question in the form on whether or not we can share the data. So maybe that's where we add the disclaimer in the form.
I just put it at the bottom and just say, you know, beyond the request for the report and how you answered the questions, we don't share your data with anybody. Period. I guess that can be as simple as that.
Do you know if the data, because it is in Salesforce, is integrated with anything else that the Linux Foundation does?
In terms of not CHAOSS stuff?
So let's say they can see this person requested a report in CHAOSS and attended a summit.
I don't know. I can ask. I don't know.
Okay.
So the data is being stored in Salesforce, and then the request is being sent to us to complete the report. Are we capturing and saving that data on our end once it's been sent to us for the report? And can we do that?
The Salesforce data?
Yeah. So if Salesforce sends us the request for the report, are we capturing that data in some fashion on our side, like a list of these are the people we've sent reports to, or things of that nature?
Vanada is.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I've created an Google Doc file, like Excel type, and I'm capturing all the recording and that, like Salesforce ticket number and who has requested and other details like the community or like project for which we are generating the report.
Is that being stored in the cloud? Is it encrypted? Is it
It's in the Google Drive.
Any other questions, comments on community report? Otherwise, the next step is I'll create a request and then we'll
go through the
go from
process.
there.
Yeah.
I think it would be good to understand is how, if at all, the Linux Foundation could use this and make sure that they are or not. And if they are, then we can link to their privacy policy because they do have a statement around how they use data and how they use personal data.
Yeah, so as far as like what they were going to provide to us for just the CHAOSS project from the Salesforce request, one of the questions is, you know, do you mind if we contact you for future events kind of thing? So they would share that data with us. But that was about the extent of the relationship between the request for the report, it being stored in Salesforce, and us. But to your point, what they're doing, if they're doing anything other than that, I'm not entirely sure. But I'll ask Annie. I think that was your question, right? Okay.
Yeah, I think the nuance is they opt into communication from us, but does that mean they opt into communication from the Linux Foundation?
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I'll find out.
I do think we need to have some discussion about how we're storing that information on our side and how it's used as well.
Okay. I mean, is your concern that storing that information in a Google Sheet is not appropriate?
It may not be.
Why?
I'm not certain, but for privacy and security, I don't know if storing that data in a Google Sheet is appropriate. It sure could be. It's just it would be a little concerning to me when we're right now when because privacy and the use of data and is kind of a big concern. I would anytime we're collecting or managing the data that we're collecting on people, I would want to make sure that we are following best practices.
As long as it's not public, I think we're probably following best practices, and as long as we don't sell it, distribute it, reuse it for any reason.
So if we follow European guidelines, then we need to recognize that we are a data controller according to GDPR, processing data about data subjects, which are the people who make the requests. And the data subjects, our requesters, have rights to know what data we are collecting, which they have given to us, how we are using the data, how long we are storing the data, when it will be deleted. And we need to provide a way for them to ask us, hey, what data do you have for me on file? And please delete it.
And I think that can be accomplished with sheets. I think if we follow the guidelines and lock it down with the right access controls, I think we have an owner and no one else can see it unless that owner shares it.
Yep.
The policy piece is a little bit more like the owner has to manage that. But I do think stating it explicitly is a good thing in general.
I think that would be a good idea.
Georg, did that list was that just off, this just in your head?
Yes. It's something that I looked into because Bitergia provides data analytics. We have European people in our data sets, so we need to be able to handle that.
Do you have that somewhere other than your head?
It's mostly in my head. I have a few slide decks about it. I've given a presentation at the Scale where we talked about this.
I'm just thinking, could you maybe drop one of those slide decks in that has that list that you just said? Because that could be what Kevin could include in the form.
I'd rather polish it specifically for this form. I'll write something up that we can use.
Okay. And then we might need to create like an email, ask folks at the LF to create an email that's like data privacy at CHAOSS.Community or something like that. You know what I mean? Where they could actually email the request.
We probably need to include some of these documents in the governance repo and probably in the handbook as well. Just guidelines for how CHAOSS contributors handle data.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great idea to establish a data privacy form for, or like a disclaimer of page for CHAOSS as a whole, and then just to link to it.
By the way, where did we collect those data? In the US?
It's collected in the US, yes.
Okay, I'm asking because you know the Data Protection Act. It is best to save that data in the US because each jurisdiction, each country has its own jurisdiction against data. For example, any data that is collected anywhere, if it is stored in any data center within the US has authority over that data. And you know, those are some of the reasons that countries like UK and Germany had to pull away from Amazon and other data centers that were actually storing their data within the US territory. So if we are really concerned about the integrity, the security, the safety, and any kind of privacy, where we can then store the data where it was collected. So wherever the data center is within the US, we are fine.
Okay. This is all very heavy conversations, very thick. But it's really good because this is something that once we have it, I think other projects will use that as a template because we've been asked about this time and time again for the last 3 years since we existed as CHAOSS.
Well, so let's just do it then.
Yeah. I'll put together a draft for next week.
Should we reach out to some of our CHAOSS community members who might be lawyers to see if they can provide insight?
So let's just, yeah. So I mean, there is legal counsel too at the LF. So maybe we can give it a go first, and then it's maybe something that we can share. You know what I mean? Once people have reactions to it.
Yep. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. We have 5 minutes. Any other topics? This is, I know we have this agenda we walk through, but really the idea is that these meetings are open. So if you have any topics that you'd be interested in talking about, metrics related, analytics related, something from the working groups, any updates?
I have a topic, but it's a bit hairy to get through in 5 minutes. So I'm just going to kind of plant the seed and see if it progresses. I brought it up in the risk working group. I've been working more closely with Kubernetes to quantify the impact of the global pandemic on productivity and output, and looking at that over time, looking at the distribution and change of individual contributors versus organizations. And in the context of the risk working group, it's sort of a test of the elephant factor kind of times 20 in a sense of the project itself is now potentially being more sustained by the larger organizations versus the individual contributors. So is there a relationship that potentially we can measure and then create a metric out of in terms of the overall risk averse concentration within your project? Like what elements can you measure to ensure that your project can survive something like this? Not that it's going to happen a lot, but there will always be different types of global events that will impact productivity in various ways. So I wanted to bring it up at this level because I think it's an appropriate topic for the risk working group, just because we're looking at how things are impacting your project, and risk can be multipliers on any of the metrics that we've looked at and can impact many of the metrics that other working groups are looking at. But I'd be curious if this topic has come up in other working groups, and what form has it taken, either in metrics or in looking at how it's impacting the kinds of metrics that you think are appropriate for that group.
I don't know that I've seen this in other working groups come up with respect to, say, global events. I did have a question. Is the metric, or kind of the understanding that's hoped to be gained, is whether the project would be resilient to a global issue, or is it about, now that the global issue has occurred, can we get a better understanding of our resilience at this time? You know what I mean? Is it trying to predict the future, or is it trying to understand the current state of events?
I think it's a little bit about trying to quantify the resilience of a project. And I think this is a test case. So we're looking at incredible diminishing activity, and specifically in some groups. And so that is impacting the overall productivity and output and the release cadence for Kubernetes for the cycle. So we know exactly what it has done to us, but we know I mean, the project is still functional and it's still growing, and it's still being productive. It's just the concentrations have changed. So we do have a measurable impact of what this has done to productivity. And the project has been able to pull through. So what are the qualities of the project that potentially we could measure in other projects that would point to the overall resilience of it? And I always like to remind everyone, like myself, constantly, that Kubernetes is both constantly the best and the worst case project to look at. Because there's an incredible amount of data that will lend itself to actually building models like this, but then most other projects are not like Kubernetes. So it's all with a grain of salt, but we're hoping to learn something from it.
I like the phrase of resilience too, as opposed to sustainability in this case, because sustainability, I think the way we've always talked about it is, in a perfect world, will this project just kind of go on into perpetuity, right? And this is really about just this, like COVID. Like, are we resilient to these global effects that may go away at some point? And naturally, it's related to sustainability. I don't think you can unpack the two from each other, but I like that term.
I love resiliency here too. I guess the question in my mind is, it like the resiliency of sustained contribution, or like, yeah, I feel like there's like a mapping here I'm getting lost in. And thinking from the value point of view, I think, it would be interesting to invest more in resilient projects. So like, I think there is a value play that could correlate to it. So I'm thinking of it through that lens, but I get a little lost in the translation of like, what is it? Yeah, what is the resilient versus fragile part of the system that you're mapping? And does it have to do with sustained contribution? Does it have to do with, I can't think of really another angle yet, because this hurts my head in a really interesting way. Yeah. But yeah, quick thoughts.
I like that point a lot, because I think we're looking at all of the above right now.
Cool.
So it's the same contribution and activity type in the various working groups. And so I think between those three things, that's enough to chew on for a while. But I think there's also potentially more dynamics that I think it's challenging, because each project has its own characteristics, and the project itself is still a software that someone can download and use. And so like, I guess the like project sustainability piece is whether or not the thing still runs. And I think that's like, so there's sort of the overall resilience of the project as well as resilience of the community. And I think it is worth separating them, especially because every project is different.
Super cool.
Excellent conversation. Thanks for bringing that up, Sophia. It's always great to have these conversations. I unfortunately have to end this. We are 9 minutes before the top of the hour. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We can pick up next week or in any of the working groups, and have a good rest of your week.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.